Hey guys, welcome back. In this YouTube tutorial, I'm going to show you how I go about painting this tree in Adobe Photoshop. You can use this method to paint whatever type of tree you like. In this lesson, I'm also going to cover how to use reference images as well as how to make a custom brush for our leaves. And before we get into the video, I will note that I am using a drawing tablet. However, if you don't have one, then it's all good. So yeah, let's get straight into the video. We're going to start off by creating a custom brush, but if you already know how to do this, I'll put a timestamp up for you to skip to the next section. We want to create a brush that will allow us to scatter leaves randomly as we paint. So I'm starting off with a blank canvas, and on an empty layer we're going to make our brush shape. So select the lasso tool on the toolbar or by pressing L on the keyboard, and then we're pretty much going to create a sort of leaf-like shape with the selection tool. Fill in the selection with a black brush when you're done. I'm pretty much messing around with the brush shape. I'm adding transparency by painting on light strokes with the eraser and brush tool. Pretty much if you add transparency to the shape, then the brush that we will create from it will be transparent in those areas. I'm using a square brush and a textured brush for this shape, but you can really go crazy with your shape and use whatever brush you like. It's pretty much up to you. Okay, so once you have finished shaping your brush, we are going to select our whole shape and go to Edit, Define Brush Preset, and then name your brush whatever you like. Deselect the selection by pressing Ctrl D. You can now paint with the custom brush, but we're going to have to add some brush settings for our brush to be useful. Select the Brush Settings panel. You can find this under the Windows drop-down menu. On this panel, there are lots of different ways we can change the behavior of our brush. I recommend you play around with the settings here, but I'll show you on screen the settings that I have made for this custom brush. Just make sure you add some form of angle and size jitter in the Shapes Dynamics tab to add randomness to the brush. When you are finished with the settings, click on the cog icon at the top right of the brush panel and select New Brush Preset, then name your new brush. This is an important step because it will save all your brush settings that you've made. So now I've got two new documents open. One is a blank canvas that we will use to paint our tree, and the other is our reference image. You can use whatever tree reference you want, but I'm going to use this photo of a tree that I photographed in New Zealand back in the day. I like to have both documents open on the same screen so that I don't have to switch between each one. So to do this, slide the reference document tab to the right hand side. Go to Windows drop down tab, then Arrange, then click on 2 up vertical. I like to slide my reference document across so that it doesn't take up too much space. Now that we have done that, we can start painting our tree. We're going to start off by creating an outline sketch of our tree. By the way, if you want to change the background canvas color like I have, you can use the Fill tool by pressing Shift F5. Create a new layer and name it Outline. Also, if you right click the layer, you can change its color. This can be useful for identifying layer types, especially if you're working with a lot of them. I'll personally color any layers in gray that show reference outlines or guides. Grab any brush and make it really small. Remember to use the bracket keys to easily change the brush size. And yeah, just start sketching the outline of your tree. You don't have to make it look pretty. It can honestly be ugly as hell. All we're doing is creating basic guides for where our branches, trunks, leaf clusters, etc. are gonna go. To paint in our tree trunk and branches, create a new layer underneath the outline guide layer. I'm going to grab a hard edge brush and use a dark desaturated brown for my base color. You can sample colors off the reference image if you like. As I'm painting, I'm following the outline guide that I have sketched as well as the reference image itself. If the outline guide is getting in the way, you can reduce the layer opacity in the layers panel. I'm going to speed up the video here, but there's a couple of points I want to mention. So I'm using the same brush for the brush tool as well as the eraser tool. If you want to use the same brush for the eraser tool, you have to hold down Ctrl and Alt when selecting the brush, otherwise it will default back to the brush tool. Also, you can spend as much time as you want painting in branches. Because the leaves on this tree are quite sparse, I'm spending more time painting in individual branches than what I would usually do, but depending on the tree you are referencing, it might be different. It's finally time to put that custom brush we made earlier into good use and paint on some leaves. Create a new layer with the brush tool selected, right click and navigate to our custom brush. Select a darkish green color or a color similar to your reference. Simply paint the leaves onto the canvas. On areas where leaves are sparse, I will tend to make small dabs with my brush instead of strokes. I also add a second layer which is underneath the trunk layer. I'm going to paint down any leaves that would be in the back of the tree and behind the trunk and branches. Now I've got my leaves painted on, but they're a little bit dull at the moment. If you check out the reference image, there are, although subtle, a variation of green tones from where the light hits the leaves. We're going to select our top leaf layer and select Lock Transparent Pixels in the layer panel. This will allow us to alter already existing pixels and will prevent us from creating or deleting any new ones. So now I'm going to grab a soft brush with darker and lighter color values. I'm going to lightly paint the leaf clusters so that the top parts of the clusters are lighter and the bottom parts are darker. Now I'm going to grab my custom brush again, and up the top of the brush options panel, make sure you have the pressure for opacity setting turned on. This will make it so that the opacity of the brush is dependent on how much force you apply to your drawing tablet. With this, I'm going to sample colors and make light strokes to break up the smooth blending of colors in the leaf clusters. If you're not using a drawing tablet, you can change the opacity slider, which is located next to the pressure for opacity setting. To finish off, I'm going to add some details to the trunk and to the branches. Looking back at the reference image, you can see areas on the trunk and branches that are lighter and areas that are darker. Again, for this, I'm going to lock transparent pixels on the trunk layer and paint on the colored variations with a square brush. I also grab a flat brush, which allows me to create sharp, thin lines based on the direction of the brush. This brush is useful for adding those shaded lines that you see on some tree trunks. The last thing I do here is add some of those tiny and thin branches that poke out of the tree trunk, like what is shown on the reference image. I'm only using a single color with a square brush. When you're doing this, make sure you turn transparent pixels off. So yeah, here's the finished result, and that's pretty much the process of creating it, guys. Now that you know how to paint these trees in Photoshop, I recommend you go out and try it for yourself. But that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Chuck us a like and a sub, and you're more than welcome to watch the time lapse of me finishing the background for this painting. So yeah, see you next time.